Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all attendees worldwide, and a warm welcome to our speakers for the Daring Cities 2023 session. My name is Porya Salehi. I'm the head of Urban Research, Innovation, and Development team at ICLEI World Secretariat and coordinator of ICLEI's Global Research and Innovation Strategy across all ICLEI offices. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this Daring Cities session titled An Expanded Climate and Innovation Agenda, ECIA for short, for a just and equitable climate emergency response in cities and regions. ICLEI is championing an expanded climate and innovation agenda with our fantastic partners, Mission Innovation, RISE Research Institutes of Sweden, and UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub. Today, we have the opportunity to share this agenda with you, including the central ideas behind it and some of the tools that support its implementation. Before we start, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event, since we want to ensure it's as interactive as possible. As you can see, you've been automatically muted. However, you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions to today's presenters by typing them into the Q&A box in Zoom. You may send in your questions at any time. We'll collect these and address them towards the end of the session, or our speakers may take it in writing. You can also upvote other participants' questions by clicking on the like button to indicate you're also interested in having that question asked. This function will help us address the most voted questions first. We will also be using Slido for our interaction with you all in the audience today. So we are greatly looking forward to leveraging the incredible expertise and knowledge in the room today, and to further our thinking around human needs and global sustainable development. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared on the Daring Cities website. This way, we can ensure that the insights from this discussion impact well beyond this session to experts in different time zones or those who unfortunately couldn't join us today due to some conflicting commitments. We've already received quite a number of requests to share this from different partners, including SDG Compact Fellows and UNFCCC, so we are looking very forward to this conversation. The topic we are discussing today is truly game-changing. We are going back to mental models and our overall approach to transform how we address the climate emergency, and in parallel, enable development that will allow a population of 11 billion people to live flourishing lives. Yes, you heard it correct, 11 billion people. I think lessons learned, we shouldn't only plan for the current population, but also looking into the forthcoming population and looking into the horizons of population growth within the next decades will reach 11 billion people. So we would be better off to plan for 11 billion flourishing lives. For this task, we have brought together incredible speakers today who are experts and leaders in the processes of innovation and transformation to guide the session today. It's my pleasure to welcome the following distinguished speakers: Masamba Thiori, the project executive of the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub at UN Climate Change Secretariat; Dennis Pamlin, the executive director of Mission Innovation's Net Zero Compatible Initiatives, and who is senior advisor to RISE in Sweden; and Alison Gilliland, the Council of Dublin City Council and Deputy Head of European Committee of the Regions for COP28 delegation from Dublin; and Petra Zurovisnova, apologies if I'm not perfect in pronouncing that surname, the first Chief Innovation Officer of the city of Bratislava in Slovakia; Lívia Corrêa, Chief of Environmental Department in the city of São José dos Campos in Brazil; Jan Melkersen, the Enterprise Manager of Falkenberg Municipality in Sweden; and last but certainly not least, Caitlin Nash, co-founder of Loudhailer and GIIG Africa. Before we get into the deep dive of today's session, I would like to take a moment to introduce the topic and the angle from which we are approaching it. We are on the brink of surprising and surpassing and very pressing critical climate thresholds. Recent studies suggest surpassing the 1.5 degree threshold will involve irreversible impacts and lead to exacerbating existing global inequalities, as vulnerable communities are disproportionately affected by these impacts. also leading to an increase in conflict, displacement, and climate-induced migration. Climate change is not just an environmental crisis, we all know it. It's an existential crisis that affects all of our systems, including urban and regional systems. The reality is that for a problem of this scale and complexity, our current approaches are insufficient. I think kindly the local leaders find it really tough to match past performances with the conventional approaches and tools. And in most cases, climate action has been static and focused on optimizing our existing systems and processes rather than leveraging new ways of thinking and emerging technologies to create new systems. So social biologist Edward Wilson said that creativity is a defining trait of our species that arose in the human condition in response to the need to solve problems and adapt to changing environments. So as a leading global network of cities, periodically, we see that many cities worldwide are determined to be a part of the transformations needed for a better world. Leaders are increasingly recognizing that new capacities are needed to engage with complexities, collaborate with local stakeholders and citizens and other actors, and shift the role from service providers to community enablers and improve and reinvent how services are delivered. And more importantly, an enabling environment is created collectively. However, until now, a guiding strategy for achieving these essential changes was not in place, at least not to the level that is required, and not a type of sort of approach that has this replication potential and flexibility that could be contextualized for any given context globally. One cannot solve dynamic problems with static solutions. And we all know that a single actor taking action in isolation will certainly not be able to address climate change or deliver on human needs. For cities to realize their potential as centers for creativity and collective problem solving, we need a new approach. This is where expanded climate and innovation agenda comes into picture. First, an expanded climate and innovation agenda places human needs at the center to guide innovation, solution finding, and transformation. As of this morning, the global population is 8.1 billion, based on my count. Already we are breaking ecological boundaries, and many people's needs are not being met. What about 11 billion then? Our innovation needs to go back to fundamental questions and address the root causes rather than the symptoms of challenges being faced. Do people need to get from A to B, or do they need access? When access is the human need that mobility responds to, then it opens up a broad range of alternative solutions, such as moving services online, as we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. Second, the fourth industrial revolution has led to an explosion of technologies that can be leveraged to address our most pressing challenges. However, we cannot use technocentric approaches and merely bank on them to solve our problems. We have to combine the application of technology with the critical thinking around human needs to ensure that it is used in the most effective way as a tool. So optimizing processes is only helpful when those processes are leading to the long-term outcomes that we want for a globally sustainable world. Otherwise, technology is just a tool to reinforce existing challenges, right? You've seen a lot of cases of that worldwide. So access to using technology for data-driven decision-making is critical, and making this available for all contexts, especially in the global south, where there is a lack of data and the data sets tailor-made for those contexts, is critical for overall success. And last, many cities have things that they are already doing well. And that's why one of the key slogans under this expanded climate and innovation agenda for us is meet cities where they are. And this is quite crucial. Even if these things are not necessarily climate or human needs focused, perhaps they could be in the future. So far, our lens for global sustainability has been too narrow, and we are leaving stakeholders behind, even within the local governments and within the national governments, or even pushing them in the other direction by barring them from joining in finding solutions. This is why the expanded climate and innovation agenda has a strong focus on meeting cities where they are, providing them with the necessary tools to understand where that is, where they want to be, and how this could be possible. This is extremely essential for converting the ideas behind this agenda into action on the ground. As you can tell, I'm extremely excited at the potential of this expanded climate and innovation agenda and bringing cities and leading experts on board to co-design and co-implement that. On that note, I think that is the perfect time to officially get the session underway. And on that note, I would like to kick things off by handing the floor to our wonderful colleague, Masamba Theory, as a keynote speaker of today. I've had the pleasure of working with Masamba for some time and have great respect for him. And what he's leading in the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub is amazing. I always thoroughly enjoy Masamba's insights on the importance of human needs. And we would love to hear how this expanded climate and innovation agenda is connected to the main objectives of the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub. Masamba, thank you so much for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Porya. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our dear participants. My name is Masamba Choi. I'm leading the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to participate to this important event. So the Global Innovation Hub is an initiative of the UNFCCC Secretariat launched at COP26. Sorry for that. Launched at COP26 and with a vision that is one-fold, a mission that is twofold, and core values that are threefold and articulated around caring, daring, and sharing. So about the vision of the Global Innovation Hub, we want innovation to be used more to support people and the planet, to provide well-being to people and the planet. The reality is that so far, innovation has been mainly used to support power. While science is value neutral, this is not the case for innovation. Innovation has an agenda, and so far it has been mainly used to support economic power and military power. So what we want to do is to have innovation supporting more the people and the planet. So the mission is twofold. What we want to do is to explore to what extent we can support the upscale deployment of already existing solutions. There are solutions that are already available, but that cannot be deployed at scale for different type of bottleneck. What we want to do is to contribute in removing this bottleneck and in the upscale deployment of this solution. Now, when I'm saying solution, I do not mean only technology innovation. Innovation goes well beyond technology. Technology will play a key role, but to address the big challenge of climate and sustainability, we need to have a more integrated approach where innovative technology will be combined with innovative policy instrument, innovative financial instrument, innovative business model, innovative cooperative approach, and innovative product from the culture and creative industry, because this is also about changing behavior. So all these type of solution will be considered, those that are already existing. And the challenge is how can we help deploy them at scale. So the deployment of this solution is facilitated when they are integrated. Most of the time, this is what is preventing upscale deployment. You have the technology, but you do not have the finance, or you have the technology and the finance, but you do not have the regulatory framework, or you have all these things, but people are not willing to adopt your solution. So it means that something needs to be done to enhance the adaptability of the solution. So the other aspect is where the solutions are missing, we develop a process and a methodology that will enable the development of the missing element. So this is about the mission. Now, the three core values, as I have mentioned, are articulated around daring, caring, and sharing. Why daring? We are promoting a moonshot way of thinking, which is critical when addressing challenges such as climate. Most of the time, we are not able to innovate because we tend to set our goal and target based on our understanding of or our perception of what is possible, not what is needed. And if we set our goal and target based on what is what looks like possible, what we perceive as possible, we do not provide room for innovation. So what we are promoting is to shift this focus, and when we are setting goal and target, to do it based on what is needed and not what is perceived as possible, because this is precisely the gap between what is needed and what is possible that will be the main driver for the development of innovative solution for climate and sustainability. So daring will be an important core value. The second core value is caring. We need to genuinely care for people and for the planet. And this is why the core human need will be at the center of the innovation framework that we are developing. Most of the time, people have the tendency to focus at the sectoral level when it comes to innovation, but this has a lot of limitation. So it will restrict the space for innovation. And more importantly, we will miss the most transformative type of innovative solution. So by going back to the core human need, we expand the space of innovation, and we are able to integrate the most transformative type of innovation. So if we look at the climate and sustainability solution that we can work on, they can be categorized into 6 main categories. The first category represents those climate and sustainability solutions that enable the development of alternative products that can disrupt current products that are used to satisfy core human needs, but that have high negative externalities. This is the most transformative type of climate and sustainability action. You actually disrupt a product that has negative externality, and you replace that product with another one that do not have negative externality. The second type of climate and sustainability action is actually increasing the efficiency at use of product and services. So think about, for example, carpooling or car sharing. You cannot disrupt the product, but you use it more efficiently. This is also a quite transformative type of climate action. And finally, you have those climate and sustainability action that will increase the circularity of the economy. These are also transformative type of climate action. And in all these 3 cases, the focus is on people consuming. The focus is at the consumption side, not at the production side. The focus is on change of behavior, not on improvement on the way production is done. Hence the importance of going back to the core human need, where these 3 types of very transformative climate and sustainability action are lying. And finally, the sharing part, we need to be solution oriented and not just have to solve our own problem. So all the different climate and sustainability stakeholders need not only to be solver of problem, but also developer of solution. They need to be solution provider. And collaboration, radical collaboration will be needed. The climate and sustainability action need to address the challenge holistically. So it means that we need to provide well-being, flourishing life. We need also to do it in a way that is aligned with the climate goal, that is aligned with the biodiversity goal, that is leading to land regeneration, and that is within the planetary boundary. And you can only address these things holistically if you have an integrated approach for the response. So it means that you are combining innovative policy instrument, innovative technology, innovative business model, innovative financial instrument, product from the culture and creative industry to change behavior, and so and so. So because you need to have all these things combined, radical collaboration will be needed. You need to bring together all these different actors and make them work together, make them collaborate. And this is only possible if we can come up with innovative business models that are able to create value for all the stakeholders that are involved in this collaboration. So it means that we need also to be able to share created value. So this is what, and you can see that in all these things, cities are at the center, because cities are, this is where most of the people are living, and cities are very close to their citizen, and cities are daring because so far they're the one taking the most ambitious target. And this is why the Global Innovation Hub is working very closely with cities through systemic innovation workshop to actually road test all these different ideas and make happen a world where we will have more production and less extraction, and a world that is more regenerative and less destructive, and a world that is empowering and not alienating. Back to you, Pouria.
Thank you so much, Masamba, for that inspiring message and for sharing your vision of innovation being used more to support the well-being of people and the planet. I love how you unpack this principles that is being discussed under expanded climate and innovation agenda and breaking it down in more concrete terms and basically how you are looking into the connections between these principles and the existing situations. I especially appreciate your point that innovation so far has been used to reinforce existing political and economic power structures. I think that this is where the expanded climate innovation agenda has significant potential by challenging where conventional innovation is found and looking to other grassroots sources of ideas to transform our environment, social, and economic systems. Identifying and integrating the factors to enable this and having a holistic approach is critical. And I agree with you that this is a point where significant change can be achieved. I would like now to hand the floor to my colleague, Dennis Pamlin, as the Executive Director of Mission Innovation's Net Zero Compatible Innovations Initiative. This is a really visionary and person and thought leader behind this agenda. Dennis, it would be great if you could please walk the audience through the expanded climate and innovation agenda. I'll call it the agenda from now on, and the associated tools that Mission Innovation is co-developing with the partners under your leadership, especially the 21st Century Toolbox and how it is basically envisioned to be a vital resource for local governments aiming to be solution providers or champions of the agenda. Thank you for joining us and co-facilitating this session today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pouria. And it's an honor to be here at this very timely and important event. It is hard to understand that we've been struggling with climate change and the global sustainability agenda for more than 30 years now on the international scene. And to be honest, we've done some progress, but not closely enough. And that's a little bit why we started this. And I'd like to share a couple of slides just to help sort of with the communication around this and how we can create a narrative, because I think the challenge is very little now today about economy and technology, and much more about the way we think and how we approach this challenge. And as both Purya and Masamba said, and we try to summarize this expanded climate innovation agenda in one simple image. It's really about looking at the sustainability strategy or strategies at all, not just looking at existing sectors, but on human needs. And this might sound trivial, but that is not what we've done. If you go to any conference and ask for climate leadership, it's about people reducing emissions from current sectors. And that's the other axis also. How do we approach stakeholders? When we ask a city to be a climate leader, today, most of the times, it's about reducing the city's emissions. But how about the city being a provider of solutions? And not just reducing emissions, but providing sustainable ways of delivering on human needs. So we're not just looking at, and again, I want to emphasize that it's not about getting rid of the old agenda. It's needed that we look at the old structures and see how they should be dealt with, but moving the focus to human needs and also asking for solution providers, that's the space where we want to be now, and say, how do we put more focus in this area? And I think the first image that I think I want to really have on everyone's brain is this. Oh, sorry, that I want to also, the first slide is the initiative that I'm leading that was launched back at the Paris meeting, because that's where the world was really shifting and said, before that, please remember that for decades, the idea of approaching climate change was to reduce your emissions by 5 to 10%, the Kyoto commitments, that was in 1997. And all the way to Paris, that was what most of the world were focused on. And of course, if you only need to reduce emissions by a few percent, you can look at the old structures and say, how do we tweak them to become more efficient? What happened in Paris was the revolution. All of a sudden we said, we need a global target for all the world, and we need to make sure that we stay beyond 1.5 degrees if we're aiming for that. And that just should have changed the whole game plan, but it did not. Most people just stuck with the old tools and said, let's just crank up the volume on those. Instead of reducing your emissions by 7%, now do it by 90 or 100%. But that was really strange, because the whole idea about the initial Kyoto was that the rich countries should start by looking at how do we explore a transition towards this low carbon economy. But now we're looking at the whole world. And for most of the world, it's an insult to talk about reducing emissions, because they don't have very much. The question for them is not how to reduce emission, but how to avoid emissions as we move forward. And that's also where we have really focused on the concept of avoiding emissions, because it's what we do when we take the next step. Reducing emissions is we're looking backwards and saying, how do we move from these bad things? But by talking about reduced emissions, that is both the rich world, avoiding emissions by doing something smarter, but also those in the emerging countries, the poor countries, that are moving ahead and giving smart solutions to their population and avoiding emissions. And that should be given as much credit and much focus as the people in the rich world. But still now, with a focus on reducing emissions, so much attention is just given to the big polluters and how they progress, and not on all the solution providers that really helping the world move forward. So that's really about the big picture. And as Purya said, we are past 8 billion last year. We're already on 8.1, and we are likely to hit about 11 billion. So if we plan for the future, we should make sure that 11 billion people can live flourishing lives, not just move out of poverty. Everyone should be able to live flourishing lives. And that's also what IPCC said. And the 1.5 special report is one of the most forgotten documents, I think, when it comes to climate, because they said not all climate reductions and climate strategies are equal. We can have a simplistic P4 scenario, which is basically doing what we do today, and then you just try to push much more renewables and have some CCS in the end. But that will destroy biodiversity, it will keep poverty on the planet, etc. Or we can go for a P1 scenario, the low energy demand, the smart pathway, where we actually don't even need CCS, because we're so much smarter. But we also make sure that we save biodiversity. We provide smart water solutions, and we help people move out of poverty. And we forgot that these are very different things. Still today, people are not asked, are you on a P1 or a P4 pathway? We only ask, are you reducing emissions? Are you on a 1.5 or 2 degrees pathway? But these are fundamentally different, and we need to highlight that. And that's where cities are then, the traditional way is that cities, they copy this old perspective and said, oh, where are big emissions? It's from the buildings, it's from the cars, etc. Let's reduce the emissions from those. Not bad to start with. But as we move forward now to this expanded climate innovation agenda, the cities, as they usually do, should put human needs at the forefront and say, how do we deliver on those? And not just how do we deliver on those in our country or in our city, in our regions, how do we deliver on those so what we do is compatible with a world where everyone can live flourishing lives? Because we can't just say that we reduce emissions and then use so much natural resources and use so expensive solutions that most of the world is excluded. So that means that I need to look more towards the solution providers and say, who can provide this solution for me? And then all of a sudden, of course, startups and innovation expert becomes much more important. Not the one who's going to tweak the current system, but those who build the new systems. So that is really a very different agenda. And very often within cities, these are different departments. Some are trying to comply and report and make sure that you follow the current legislations. Some are taking the leadership and understanding, where do we want to be as a city, as a region in the future? What is our role in the world? Not just how do we comply with the current regulations to reduce emissions or the current reduction plans. We go beyond that. And those are the kind of cities and regions we are looking for. And for that, we developed a toolbox. And now you can go to our webpage and look further. But we will touch upon some of those because everyone that will talk today is a very good example of how these tools can be used and the kind of leadership that can be highlighted. But I just want to part with one thing that we have basically in all tools. And this is both Masamba and Priya said, if we focus on human needs, we need to be very clear, what is human needs? And we have two parts of human needs. Fundamental human needs that we need to survive. We need nutrition, we need protection from the element, but we need more. We need also to have flourishing lives, social development and personal growth. Then most of the things are trying to develop, deliver on those. You can have energy, but energy can undermine or support. You can have mobility access that can undermine and support. It's only if it's mobility access to sustainable nutrition, if it's mobility nutrition or mobility access to smart education, that is when you build that. So we need to be very careful. That means that we will always need energy, we will always need mobility access, we will always need information knowledge, we will also need natural resources, but we need to make sure that those are connected to how they actually deliver on human needs. And what we see now with cities that are starting to embark on that is that we see positive drivers. We see growth, we see employment, we see export, we see startups, we see a new generation of solution providers. We see cities and humans at the center talking about how they get a better life, not how they reduce emissions. We see new stakeholders, the incubators and the startups that come into the scene. We see inclusiveness because all parts of the city government or the regional governments are part of this, not just the compliance department. We see also a shift that both have talked before about this transformative innovation. To use this 11 billion filter is really challenging us to think outside the box. And it's exciting because it's about helping the world become a better place. The best thing now is to see how many millions of people can you provide solutions to, not how fast you can reduce yourself to zero. That is a good thing to do, but for most people, it's much more exciting to be part of a journey when you are delivering something positive for people. And we now have a couple of sprints, and this slide will be up. I will not go into details, but we want people to be part of developing these tools, to make sure that you can be solution providers, that your incubators and startup can be quantified, that the data that is needed for a human needs-based approach is there, that you can help direct by being litmus test and say, we are cities around the world that can put demands on these initiatives to ask, is those really helping us? So these are some of the things that we really hope that you can join us in now, and we're starting to get a really exciting group ready, and that's where we also want to present at COP28. And at the heart of this, in the collaboration we've done with ICLEI also, and also earlier with UNFCCC, has been a simple tool that we developed together with IPCC scientists that says, these are key words to see if cities are really having a P1 global sustainability approach and focus on human needs and solutions rather than the static approach. So we've used this to find some really exciting strategies around the world. And I can be honest and open here and say that very few climate strategies actually fall into that, but many innovation strategies, export strategies, vision strategies, etc., are much more closer to this. So maybe that's also something that we can think about where we should look for the future. And that's also where I would like to hand over to Petra and just say that she's one of those that when we use this tracking tool, and we found her because when we were doing this sort of got all the strategies, we saw the urban innovation strategy, focus on flourishing lives, and so strong a solution provider. So we said, here we already have a solution provider and a hero for this new expanded climate innovation agenda. So over to you, Petra. Share something of what you've done in this area.
Thank you so much, Dennis, and good afternoon to everyone. I hope you can hear me well. I'm sitting in a playground, just observing kids and looking into the future, because as people working for the municipality, we sometimes need to step out of our offices and just be around people to understand how they use and behave in the city. So I would like to just give you a brief overview of what we are trying to do with my team. The innovation team in Bratislava has been set up 5 years ago, and our purpose was to bring innovation into the city. But it's not just technological solutions or smart city solutions, but we really wanted to focus on user needs and understanding what residents are struggling with and how we can improve the functioning of the city. So we are always starting with our purpose, with why, with understanding where people are, what they need, what the city needs, how we can make it more effective. The way we try to talk about ourselves is fixing the unfixable. So there are lots of policies, lots of organizations that are risk averse. There was a question in chat about how you convince risk averse organizations to work with you. And we got a lot of no's when we started to work with the City Hall, but we also got some yeses, and the yes came from the people that actually felt the pain, and we started to talk to them about what things didn't work in their work and how we can help them improve their processes and the way they're delivering services. We're trying to bring flexibility and innovation into the City Hall and also create new skills, and say to our colleagues, but also to residents, it's a continuous improvement. We are trying to make it work for everyone, to experiment and to try out. So what we've done over the past 3 years is we've introduced new digital services, because this was one of the main pain points for the city, to optimize its flow, to understand how the processes work internally, and also deliver good services to residents. Because if you need to go and pay taxes, or you need to get an approval, or you want to ask a question, you really want to make it simple, so the city is perceived as a partner and someone who you can trust, because this trust is a baseline if you want people to change their habits, if you want for them to think about the future, and also if you want them to engage in responsible behaviors, because when it comes to climate change and how the cities are changing rapidly, you really need to have everyone in the city on board to help you achieve that goal. Bratislava is a city that is prone to floods. So in June, for example, within 12 hours, we had the amount of floods or the amount of rain that was equal to 1 month worth of rain. And that's something that the infrastructure itself can't actually cope with. So we need to create mechanisms and strategies to prepare the city to be more porous, to be more ready for this much rain. But we also need to get residents ready and also have plans where what they can do when something like this happens, but also how they can prevent more disastrous weather events with their behaviors. So for that, we use other tools as well. So we've introduced a framework. So me personally, I hated policy when I started working for the city. I thought it was a necessary evil, but actually if you create a flexible policy and a framework, which actually allows you to experiment and try new things, this can actually improve the function of the city hall itself, save money, and actually test something before you invest in it. So we've introduced a framework for City Lab, which is kind of an experimentation place where we try new technologies that will help us address either climate change challenges or security challenges. We test out different sensors to see if they're effective before we roll them out in the whole city. Everything we try to do is user-centric. So we try to understand who the user is, if it's an internal user, if it's kids on the playground, if it's parents, if it's homeowners, and what kind of information they need. Because to be able to effectively deliver change, you need courage. You need to be able to dream of the solutions, participate, co-create the solutions with your stakeholders, make mistakes and fail, because that can possibly happen. And there's never one solution that suits everyone. So it's about a portfolio of solutions to try out. Then you need to participate with the stakeholders and involve them in the process. So they become part of it and they take it as their own. And you also need to communicate it, to put it in the larger framework. Why are we doing this? Why is this change happening? I know it can be painful, or it is harder to onboard people and change, but then when they see the benefits and it's simple for them, then they appreciate it. And to give you an example before I finish, we've introduced a really fast solution for tax payments, and everyone was actually afraid to communicate it because people were saying, we don't want to communicate tax payment, but this is something that everyone needs to do. And we made it so simple and so easy for everyone that people actually love it, and they compete who's gonna pay their taxes faster. So change can be hard, but change can be also easy if it's done well and if it's done with the stakeholders in mind. One last thing, right now, as cities, we need to start planning for 1.5 degrees. So if we are looking at our strategic plan, and we're not looking at the current climate, but we need to be looking at the future and how we can change behaviors now to actually have our cities livable and comfortable for our residents. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Petra. It was impressive. And it was fantastic that you're calling in from a playground. I think that this grounds our conversation in what we are focusing on, improving well-being for all citizens, including the smallest ones that you can see a handful of them in the playground in front of you. And fixing the unfixable is a great point of departure for this conversation. I appreciate also that you have chosen to start the innovation process with a focus on building trust and working on the services that people use often as a way to change behavior over a longer period of time. I think that goes very well with what Dennis was mentioning, in the sense that like now citizens and incubators and startups are coming into the picture as solution providers more and more. And I loved one point that you mentioned in terms of flexibility in policy. Yes, like policy tools might be challenging, but at the same time much needed. But the point of flexibility is quite crucial. Particularly, I think that point that you mentioned is the gist of a number of papers in innovation that I read. Flexibility for experimentation, and experimentation is a mother of innovation. And of course, like over time, expanding to the other tools that you mentioned to help build resilience to extreme weather events, as an example that you mentioned, was another highlight. And experimentation often gets a bad representation, and it's assumed that it's expensive and in most cases results in failures. But it's great to get a positive example of experimentation from you, of how experimentation can be integrated at a smaller scale before then expanding it to bring about bigger changes. It's inspiring, truly, to hear about the courage to try new approaches, be willing to fail. Failure is part of the journey, and have the broader vision of why you're doing these things. So those are all great points for us to take forward. And going back to what Dennis shared, before doing so, I'd like to encourage all our speakers to take the questions in the Q&A box, being mindful of time. It'd be lovely if you could take the questions in writing, and I see a couple of questions for Dennis as well there. But the other speakers who haven't spoken yet, please feel free to share your responses on any question that you would like. But thanks, Dennis, for the in-depth introduction and drawing our attention to the fact that the technologies and the capacities exist, but the approaches are limiting them. What happened in Paris was indeed a revolution that should have changed the whole approach. I like your reflection on why this hasn't been the case. We need to turn attention to solution providers in order to ensure that everyone can live flourishing lives. These pathways are fundamentally different, and we cannot continue to refer to all approaches as climate action simply. So pathways such as this agenda have a scope for significant impact across environmental, social, and economic sectors. No doubt, we need to work together to define strategies capable of delivering all those human needs within these contexts and sectors as well. But moving from sector-based to a solution cluster approach, and moving from static problem solving to dynamic solution provision is absolutely a game-changing sort of thinking that we need in this context. And a new generation of solution providers, as you mentioned, including incubators and startups that are now becoming more and more part of the solution, will certainly impact the transformative changes required at the local level. And last but not least, I think your idea around litmus test can certainly serve as a way to road test how we can make these changes and how local governments can shift their role and co-develop these solutions with all these solution providers within the local, regional, and national levels. So before moving to our next speaker, Dr. Alison Gilliland from the city of Dublin, I would like to hand the floor to Dennis to provide a very short background on the full iceberg approach, which is a mental model for problem solving, and many actors currently understand challenges from an above the surface perspective. But looking at the patterns and once of events is not going to is not going to be enough. But we need to look into this full iceberg. So this level may allow for short-term relief. However, it doesn't really enable the root causes of the patterns or event to be addressed. And we need to recognize and identify these patterns. And this requires deeper analysis to understand the driving systemic factors that leads to basically understanding the full picture to design the right solutions for them. Once we understand this deeper level, we are able to design or co-design effective strategies to foster the outcomes. So Dennis, I would appreciate if you walk us quickly through the iceberg before passing the floor to Alison. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Purya. And yeah, I'll just show the image because I think it's quite telling in terms of, as we were discussed earlier, if you want to do something now, experimenting and start doing something more substantial, you need some tools. And Ireland and Dublin was part of this journey with OECD, when they actually got a traditional consultant first to say, how are we going to deal with the transport challenge? And they, of course, came back and say, electrify. But then Ireland started thinking that that is not really enough. So they then invited OECD, and together with OECD, we also developed this sort of full iceberg approach, because we feel that the tip of the iceberg, that's how people respond. They see the problem, they see the cars, and then they attack the car. But of course, why are we driving? What are the new ways of providing services? So that was really exciting because, and Alison is going to talk more about that, but this idea of you need to reach out to other departments, you need to start asking deeper questions about the mandate you have and what are the really goals you have in your cities around these things. So this is a way of just, in a very systematic way, go through and say, what are the data that we need? What are the incentives and tools? What are the underlying goals? But also, what are the mindset? And what is the idea of well-being? Many people today in cities think a car is a good thing. We should just have cars. But this framework allows us to ask, is this really what you need? And is this really a way forward for a flourishing society? So, Alison, I look forward to hear your thoughts and your experience of this sort of deeper work, and maybe also share some of the experiences from using this process.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dennis, for introducing the concept there. And it's great to be with everybody here this morning, sharing and learning together about how we can reduce emissions. I suppose that's the ultimate goal. And as you pointed out there, cars are big emitters of emissions, and electrifying them is not necessarily an option. We are a very car dependent country with a lot of rural areas, so we have a lot of cars there. We're trying to increase our public transport, but we're very conscious at an urban, a city level, a city like Dublin, that we need to help our citizens transition to more active travel. We're conscious, you mentioned that human need level, people need to get around, whether it be for work, school, education, medical appointments, friends and family, shopping, sports, recreation. But we're also very conscious of the different circumstances of our citizens. From a socioeconomic perspective, not everybody has a car, not everyone has access to a bicycle, public transport. We do have a majority of people who are able-bodied and well capable of transitioning, but we're conscious that we have people with mobility issues, and for them a car is their lifeline. We're also conscious of gender. Women have greater safety concerns when it comes to active travel and the use of public transport, and then women with children find public transport and active travel more difficult, particularly at their younger ages. But we're also very conscious that transport and mobility habits are laying down at a very young age. So our young citizens need to be able to access good mobility and to start those routines earlier. From an active travel perspective, Dublin really grasped the tip of the iceberg during the COVID pandemic, when we got funding to install temporary cycle lanes all over the city, conscious that we had essential workers who didn't have cars, who needed to get to their work, and we had reduced use of public transport. And also that well-being aspect. People wanted to get out and about and away from the confinement of their home, but also a local confinement. So we technically transformed the city, adding tens of kilometres of cycleways. Now, normally we would have quite an extensive public consultation because we'd be very conscious of the need to bring people with us. And we tried to keep that consultation by moving it online with requests for cycle lanes in my area. But we, in general, our staff made the decisions, and it was around those main urban routes to and from work. So it was very much a work focus for essential workers. Post-pandemic, I suppose it allowed us a time to reflect on what we had done and to evaluate. And then, as you pointed out in the iceberg model, to use the data. So we looked at the data on mobility habits, and we really targeted making permanent those cycle lanes that had most use. And we went back into consultation with local constituents, very much taking a phased approach. So we would redesign it from a permanent perspective. We'd get local feedback, because we had noticed there was a lot of tension between car parking requirements and some of our citizens. So we tried to iron them out. An example was on one particular suburban road, we didn't know, because we didn't have the data, that there was a doctor's surgery. So we put in 3 car parking spaces there and redesigned the cycle lane around that. So little things like that our citizens mean a huge amount to them, access to medical facilities. We were able to work with them. We also focused on schools, and we did what we call school zones. So to encourage children to cycle or walk to school, we painted the roads, we put in pencil-shaped bollards. And again, that was in consultation with the school, with the parents of the local community. And we also supported what we call bike buses, where parents, somebody goes in front, somebody goes behind, and the kids are in the middle, cycle to school. One of the areas that we did have a little bit of tension with was around businesses. We have a policy of a 15-minute city. So how, from a work perspective, particularly a delivery perspective, can we accommodate that? And conscious then that we have businesses coming back and trying to reestablish themselves post-pandemic. The data was telling us that people wanted a more walkable city. We were trying to pedestrianize more streets, but businesses still needed their deliveries. They needed to get goods in and out. We all know cargo bikes are one of the solutions to that. They cost, it takes support. So we set up public-private partnership with Bleeper Bikes, a pilot, €100 to rent the cargo bike for 6 months. And we gave them all the support that we could. And that scheme really, really worked. We had chemists, we had coffee shops, we had restaurants, bookshops, all using them. And it changed the dynamic in the street. And once one sort of retail area or shop could see that their colleagues down the road were using it, encourage others to use it. And then that allowed us, I suppose, to engage, to further pedestrianize streets, or have shared cycle and walking streets. So the aim there was to put the supports in place, to look at our own systems, see what might work with our stakeholders to try and change their mindset, but in a way that gave them support and that it could be scaled up down the line. We're still not there. We really need to have another reevaluation. Our stats are telling us that car use has increased as we've seen people transition back into the office. So now what we need to do is qualitative assessment. We really need to stop some of those cars and ask them, where are you coming from and why are you using your car? And understand why they're not using either public transport or active travel. We need now to look at sort of cycling from a recreational perspective, the use of the city, cycle parking in particular, people popping in for coffees, and also nighttime economy and nighttime travel around that. I want to highlight as well a housing transition that we have made recently. We have a lot of older housing, what we call flats from the 1960s and 1970s. They're very energy inefficient, they're tired, they're worn out, and tenants would like something new. And heretofore, we've really had a demolish and rebuild approach to it, because we also have a housing crisis and we need more housing in the city. And by demolishing and rebuilding, we can rebuild more units. But we're very conscious of our carbon footprint there, cement, all the rest, both embodied carbon and operational carbon. So what we have done is literally torn up a 10-year plan, and we've taken what we call an enhanced works perspective to it. So what we're looking at is insulation wrapping, new mechanical ventilation, new doors, windows, painting, something that will make the building more energy efficient, but also from a well-being perspective, better for our tenants. Doesn't mean we won't demolish and rebuild the worst, but we now have a better framework. And what we used to help us there from an innovation perspective was digital twinning, where we'd take a digital footprint of the development, and it allowed us to model different, I suppose, works we could do, whether it be the wrapping and insulation, to complete demolition and rebuild. And then we could calculate our carbon, embodied carbon, operational carbon, and make an informed decision. So we have changed our mindset there on that. I suppose one of the challenges is, that inflexibility and being able to, I won't say think on your feet, but change on your feet. And a lot of the time you're using public money. The public wants to see the very best use of that. And you may have communicated 3 years ago, this is what we're doing. And now you have to go out and say, well, actually, we've changed our minds. But that communication piece can be really difficult. But I think if you've taken people with you and that engagement and that system engagement throughout, it makes it a lot easier. So my advice is, don't be afraid to pause. Don't be afraid to put the brakes on and look and do a complete U-turn. Long term, it'll be better for both systems and the quality of living in our cities and regions. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison, particularly with that powerful note at the end of your intervention. It's interesting to hear the perspective that citizens have many different needs within a city. and there is no such a thing as a one-size-fits-all approach. It's great to hear how a change brought in through necessity during the pandemic in the form of cycleways have now been translated into permanent changes. I think that this process of reflection is absolutely critical to ensure that the interventions put in place are matching well with local needs and requirements. When these feedback loops are in place, it's possible to take a proactive action while having the flexibility to adapt to new insights that will inevitably come through. At the end of the day, I think that your intervention has drawn our attention to the difficult task of balancing the priorities and needs of different citizens and sectors, and how this can best be navigated through engagement and proactive solution finding processes where stakeholders feel heard and supported and can be taken with you. Thanks again for these great points. And I just noticed that like you refer to GHG, and then like there are some questions and remarks in the chat. I still encourage all our audience to pose their questions in the Q&A, and thanks a lot for our speakers who are taking these questions in writing. And the point that Kesha made was really interesting, you know, in the sense that like human needs and well-being should be at the center of the policy and implementation planning. Absolutely, this whole notion of planning and policy and governance systems need to change. And this is wonderful to see that like this conversation is already impacting the audience and we are on the same page. Just one point, because it came up regarding reducing emissions. I think one of the things that we look into this agenda as one principle is like, sure, we do need reducing emissions, but we need to avoid them, right? And even when you look into the scopes defined by IPCC, most of the actions are focusing on the scope 1 and scope 2 and less on the scope 3 and 4. And most local governments and corporations don't really look into that. So avoiding emissions through asking those fundamental questions perhaps can help us get where we need to go as a global community, as merely just reducing. And that's this example of transportation moving A to B, the point that Alison also mentioned. And despite Dublin and Ireland being heavily car dependent and developing the public infrastructure, yet Alison's perspective on the fact that, like, you know, we need to sort of revisit this and ensure that like we reduce the demand side was quite a positive note on that front. So just being mindful of time, I would like to yield the floor back to Dennis moving forward to provide a quick introduction to full climate assessments and cities as an exporter of globally sustainable solutions. As I mentioned during my opening address, we want to meet cities where they are and be inclusive in how identify and export globally sustainable solutions. Then perhaps you can elaborate on this for us. Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, I'll switch to one of the tools that we are developing with Perry and his team also now on how do we actually help cities, regions that are moving from only having a focus on reducing their own emissions and having goals for reducing their own emissions to those that actually have a role as a solution provider. And we were looking for good cities, regions to put into this graph. And through another tool that we developed to find how can we assess the solutions from different stakeholders, we come across a very interesting company that is called Mycorrhiza. They do sort of fungi-based protein that is also very land savings. It's really one of those sort of 11 billion solutions that you can see. And when we developed the tool for them, they constantly mentioned Falkenberg as being so important in their growth journey. So we started to look into Falkenberg a little bit, and we saw then that even next year, when the new plant is meant to be started, when they can substitute protein, that is already more than the total emissions from Falkenberg. So Falkenberg, to my knowledge, might be one of the most important solution providers on the planet per capita. But again, we don't know much about that because very few cities are reporting or talking about how much they help the world to avoid and reduce emissions. And if we look by 2030, if you see up here, this small little thing, that is Falkenberg's emissions. But that would mean that Falkenberg has already helped more than 10% of Sweden's total emissions. So if you want to be provocative, I would say that if Falkenberg would even increase their emissions slightly to increase the production of these globally important solutions, maybe we should celebrate that and not see that as something that is bad, because for the world that might need it as a transition in the same way as many poor countries and cities needs to increase before they can reduce. But here we have a solution provider that is so important. And I was so happy to come across Jan, and I hope you can share a little bit on your thinking about supporting solution providers and how you came about finding these amazing companies, because I also know that this is not the only thing you do. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Dennis. It was an introduction. I'm glad to be able to participate in this setting. I have been asked to tell a bit about what we have doing. It's still in a small scale how work, but the effect on the environment and the society is quite large. So I work as an enterprise manager for the municipality, and usually we just work to support testing existing industry or enterprises, and they did a good job, and that was reduced. And we wanted to do more. So 3 or 4 years ago, we struggled with the challenges. How to take fast and large step against sustainability and the existing companies more and environmental friendly. And also started to think if we could try to attract companies that had solutions with large impact for future food consumption, because we have, it's a small region in Sweden, situated on the west Sweden, and there was a strong issue of agriculture and industries in that area. So we tried to attract companies that have future solutions. But that wasn't easy at all, because Falkenberg is a small city, and if you have that solution for the future, the attraction is often where is money to take that forward to a company. And in all that venture capital is in Stockholm. So the first thing we did was actually to start a network of capital persons that have interest in Falkenberg and also had a lot of money. So we wanted them to invest in those kind of companies. And when we had that solution in place, it was much easier for us to push interested in starts in especially the Gothenburg region, with a very nice cooperation with the Gothenburg University and their incubator. So together with that, we started to find interesting companies that could add solutions to our old-time agriculture, nice business and industry. So we tried to attract them, and we did investments to accelerate their growth. And I think the main thing was to have this venture capital to push it into the sectors that we wanted. And food startups need a lot of support to grow fast. because there are no challenges. So we also tried to connect the startups not only to money, but also to the food industry and the ecosystem. And they could have a good exchange between each other. So they from here, and we immediately tried to give them senior advisors from the same industry. And we have a lot of companies in the food tech sector, but also a lot of energy solutions. And in small scale, we have been doing this for years now, and the investors have invested 14 million euros in 15 different companies. All are either established in Falkenberg or connected in strong way to Falkenberg. So we have been some kind of sector for these startups to grow in a rapid way. And one of the companies is the one that is previously mentioned, Koreana. It's a based project, and it's a success story, and that helped us also in the beginning that we in the early days met Koreana. And we have been supported from the municipality and the politicians. In the beginning, it was hard for us to explain what we tried to do. But they gave trust in us. And it's much about what earlier today, there and also having aspect is because it helps all the people to move or to move in the direction. So, and we have tried, we have been in contact with a lot of companies, but we try to focus in companies is providing solutions for the future. So that is we mainly have done, and we have met a lot of interesting companies. We have been working with one company who built full-scale wine towers with local wood, and they are as high as mill or wine tower that is not concrete. So we also have worked with a lot of companies in the energy sector, and we have also tried to facilitate the projects that includes existing companies with the new startups, and we have been succeeding with having a lot of money from the EU to make this together with the companies. I think we can stop there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jan, for your intervention and joining us despite the connection issues that you're facing. But we really appreciated your intervention, especially how you as a municipality went about attracting companies with great potential for impact in the area of nutrition. Your approach of establishing a network of investors interested in Falkenberg and these types of companies and working with universities and incubator is a great insight that I'm sure that our audience can learn from. So in the interest of time, we would like to move to the next speaker, that is our lovely colleague, Livia Correa, the Chief of Environmental Department of the City of San Jose dos Campos. There is a question that we would like to pose to Livia, and while she's reflecting on that, we'll quickly ask a quick question from Dennis. So, Livia, San Jose dos Campos is a home to a technology park and one of Brazil's largest innovation and entrepreneurship hubs. And Brazil is strongly focused on moving up the value chain, and we are curious to learn more from your perspective. But before moving that, I think it would be great, Dennis, if you could kindly walk the audience briefly and introduce them to this avoided emissions notion and moving up the value chain. And if we conceptualize moving up the value chain as creating and delivering products and services that have higher value and lower environmental impact than current ones, then this is an area with great potential for avoiding emissions. Dennis, would you like to continue this thought?
Absolutely. Thank you, Purya. And I'll jump right into the image that, because we were looking around the world because we already have innovation ecosystems, many people alluded to that, but some of those, like the technology park in San Jose de Campos, is really thinking about its role, not just in accelerating any technologies, but what is really needed in society. So we're trying to find these tools also that can help the innovation ecosystem to reconnect more to what is actually needed and make sure, especially in the global south, that there's a value added. Because so far, many of the support systems from the global north, including many of the global or international organizations, basically treat the global south as a provider of natural resources. But of course, if they're going to live flourishing lives, they need to move up the value chain and can't just send away forest, minerals or something. They need to make sure that they can use that capacity and move up. And that's where we found this technology park as one really interesting examples where we think there could be an interesting collaboration. And with Brazil also hosting G20 next year, we think this approach can also be brought to the world scene. So that's just my short introduction. It's an honor to have you here, Livia. Look forward to hear your thoughts about these things.
So can you hear me? So thank you for your question and thank you for your explanation, Dennis. So it has been very interesting to hear more about the expanded climate and innovation agenda and our colleague experience. And so I'm very excited to share some of work we are doing here in San Jose and our reflection about this topic. As you mentioned, our city is the home of the largest innovation entrepreneurship hub in Brazil, the ParkTech, or the Technological Park. And it has several research institutes, universities, accelerators, and company. So this hub has helped us to bring all the actors together through a culture of innovation and collaboration. So I think that ACI is particularly relevant because we need to know what we are innovations for. So it's clear that innovation not just be about building a product that can be successful in a financial sense, yeah, but we must to promote and to support social, environmental, entrepreneurship, and innovation that positively impact the local community, the city, the region, and then the planet. Yes, I think that local focus for a government, a local government is essential. And collaboration is essential for this, especially in bringing together stakeholders, including the government agents like the municipality, the civil society organization, the academia, and international network to share knowledge and resource. Some example of that take place, hackathons, challenges, and awards have been integral to guide innovation towards addressing the local needs. And so we believe that the government must identify the local needs and challenges in collaboration with our citizens. And then we must develop and prioritize the policy response and interventions to address this challenge effectively. This is why we feel strongly that the public sector has an integral role in local innovation and develop and deploying solutions that reduce and also avoid greenhouse gas emissions and increase resilience while improving well-being with energy, housing, mobility, waste management, agriculture, food projects in our city. For instance, here, 2 years ago, our mayor decided to make São José dos Campos the first Brazilian city recognized by the ISO standards for sustainable, smart, and resilient city. Supported by the tech park, this project became a reference, helping the city to map its gap and seek innovation solutions. Furthermore, nowadays we can see that the local startups are much more connected and aware of our city's problems. Yes, they are close to the reality of the city. And one of these startups, for example, is developing a real-time GHG inventory for the cities based on accounting reports. We believe that this kind of innovation helps cities to better understand this its problem. And of course, as a government, we benefit from the access to the lead-edge science from our universities, from these new business models and technology developed by these local startups and our companies. So in my opinion, this relationship is crucial for climate innovation. And as a government, we have many challenges to face, like climate change, that are complex and dynamic. So we need to know how to translate it down to the population. We need to build platforms like this hub to facilitate collaborations that allows collectively address this challenge for society's benefit. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Livia. First and foremost, we are very grateful that you took the time and to join this conversation very early in Brazil. And of course, it's great to hear some more details regarding how you have managed to bring different stakeholders together through this innovation hub and how this has helped the city to align with international sustainability goals and standards. Kudos to the team working in the city and becoming the sustainable city by ISO. This is wonderful. I especially appreciate your insight of understanding the purpose of innovation in terms of how it can be used to address local, social, and environmental challenges. Thank you for the tangible example that you have brought to the session to ground our conversation in actions being taken on the ground in cities. For the interest of time, I would like to move to our last speaker. We have a very exciting speaker today, Caitlin, and we are excited to get her perspective as a co-founder of Loudhailer and the Global Innovation Group in Africa, and someone who is very involved in the innovation in African cities. And we would like to hear from her perspective what are the most noteworthy innovations from African cities that respond to human needs, and how does she think that African cities are basically trying to home to such innovations, and how these innovations could become global solutions, and the startups and incubators become the global solution providers. But before moving to her, I would like to briefly hand the floor to Dennis to introduce the 11 billion innovation quadrant and why African cities are at the heart of this climate solution agenda. Dennis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I don't think I need to say very much because Kathleen and I are sort of 100% aligned on this, but it's basically when we develop this toolbox to say, we can't just look at climate reduction. We also need to be very resource efficient and cost efficient. And we can't look at individual technologies. We need system solutions for 11 billion people. We call it the innovation quadrant for 11 billion flourishing lives. And that's where we come across Kathleen and the team and said, that's basically what we do. And we have many of those entrepreneurs in Africa. And we said that the world needs to know that this is happening, and that much of what we call innovation in the global north is just fiddling around the margin on an unsustainable systems. But some really truly exciting AI solutions and building solutions that are really for 11 billion people compatible is already emerging in Africa. So no more speak for me, Kathleen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dennis. And I will say, always such a privilege to speak after incredible peers, such as the likes we've had today. It's wonderful to be here. I, along with my team, have spent just over 10 years, if not longer, loud hailing African innovation to the rest of the world. And spaces such as this forum are true validation that everyone in the whole world needs an Africa strategy. Right, so let's first talk about innovation in Africa and why you may possibly be sitting very, very far away from Africa thinking, what has Africa got to do with me? I'm running a municipality, I'm building a city, I have a completely different population. How am I connected to Africa? And to the Africans listening to this, thinking, how am I connected to the North? I've been listening and reflecting to the themes: daring, expanded agenda, human needs, and I think we have to start with a conversation there, reflecting on ourselves. Change starts with leadership. And perhaps the first call to action from our side is a call for leadership, but not leadership in a traditional way. Leadership in a sense that, am I daring? Am I truly expanding my thinking? Am I really ensuring that our agenda and our projects speak to human-driven innovation and needs? So I'd also ask that anyone listening to this start by reflecting on themselves, because to truly create change, to truly create this movement, this drastic change we need, it starts with you as the leader truly believing in it. So the questions that we need to ask ourselves are not only, are we really living this, but do we really know who we're solving for or what we're building for? So some of our challenges are directly in front of us. We need better water. We need water in certain areas. We need more schooling. We need better mobility solutions. We need to reduce carbon emissions. That's right in front of us. But I would also implore that your conversations that you have with your cities and your peers include who is coming after us? Who will our children be? They talk about the alpha generation is next, and the alpha generation thinks and moves completely differently. They will not ever think of owning an asset that they don't rent out or trade or have fractional ownership with other people. They will use digital money. They will see the world completely differently, and they'll rely more than ever on peer-based reviews to make sure that things are true. So I'll also say that there's a reality we're dealing with now, and we're looking at data and we're looking at emissions. But remember, the community we are now is not the community that's coming, and we will have to find that balance. I would love to just briefly tell you about what we've been doing in Africa. Our opening colleague spoke about we live in the era of radical collaboration, and that couldn't be more true. Radical collaboration, not a few nice partnerships, pushing partnerships to the limit and making sure we have loads of them. That is the era we live in. So if anything you do does not involve clusters and clusters of partnerships, you need to rethink your approach. We know that a really successful partnership strategy or ecosystem strategy is about trust. Innovation is about trust. And we are operating in one of the most trust-efficient times the globe has ever known. And I want you to think about that all of this work we want to do relies first and foremostly on forming relationships, frameworks, and trust so that you can truly do this work together. What we have done as the Global Innovation Initiative Group in Africa is to look at how do we help scale global partnerships into and out of Africa by creating access to a trust-based community focused on innovation. We took a very simple competition mechanism called the Global Startup Awards. It was started in Denmark, in Copenhagen, for anyone who's based there. Those are our lovely global peers. And we expanded it into all 54 countries in Africa. What this means is we currently identify emerging technologies on the ground so that we have visibility of solutionists operating in local environments. And then we work to fund them and grow them through the Gig Africa Foundation and our various partners. Really, people say to us, well, what are you doing that's different? Lots of people scout for innovation. Ours is different because our innovation search is aligned to finding innovators who are frugal innovators. So Africa is the home to frugal innovators, meaning we find innovators who have solutions that are cheaper, more flexible, less resource intensive, meaning that to scale it globally is not as intensive. And that is a unique factor that many of our African innovations bring to the table. So with this, we aim to really inspire nations to transform to innovation-based economies. And lots of people asked questions around adoption. You know, we could come up with great answers. How do we get people to use it? We could come up with collaborative strategies. How do we sustain momentum for 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 years that it takes to do this? Inspiration is critical. And part of inspiration is new thinking. And new thinking means new inputs. And new inputs means new experiences and new people. All you know is the makeup of memories. So in your city and your society and your nation, you have to recode your nation with new experiences that are tangible and develop some level of momentum that builds trust and truly inspires your nation to buy into what you're doing. So to put that on the table, make sure that you have a storytelling strategy that is tangible, consistent, and provides proof points that are believable and credible. And it starts with small change. So I'll tell you a story about one of our startups we found. Our startups we found in Africa work on energy, so pyrolysis processes where they take plastic and transform it into fuel that we used at home. Last year was the first time that any African in the history of the program participated in the Global Startup Awards at a global level, and they won. And Cubic takes plastic waste and repurposes it into low-cost, affordable housing bricks that are clickable and interchangeable. Very briefly, Cubic is an example of how African innovation can be applied to the whole world. And in Cubic's journey in June 2022, so last year, they were at a funding low where they had an incredible idea and couldn't get to the next level. After walking a journey with them to intentionally create proof points to prove that this technology can be profitable and high impact, he is now funded with $5 million, building a factory in Ethiopia, partnerships with the municipalities, and in October, we will be hosting an event there and we'll walk through the low-cost housing that Cubic has built with their local government. So often the solution you want is right in front of you, and if it's not, it could be in Africa, and there could be solutions that could inspire your cities around the world.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for that inspiring presentation and for sharing your 10 years of experience promoting African innovation with us. I love the point you mentioned regarding the fact that change starts from leadership, but also framing leadership not in conventional approaches, but taking a very inclusive perspective to it. And then you were very daring to ask those daring questions in the right space, Daring Cities Forum. So I agree with the perspective that you shared, that reflective and a strong leadership from the personal level is essential in order to further this agenda and bring about drastic transformation that we do need at this time. So the agenda is aligned with the multi-generational perspective that you shared, and we know that future generations will be moving in the world in a very different way to how we currently and need to enable flexibility for this in the interventions we make today. I'm a great fan of radical collaboration, as Masamba also highlighted in his keynote speech. Trust is critical to enabling this, and I would say that it takes time to build this trust. and also willingness from both sides and understanding of the value of long-standing relationships for transformative change. We appreciate your search for frugal innovators and working with what is available to create globally sustainable solutions. It's inspiring to hear of success stories such as Cubic, and we look forward to continuing to follow the amazing success of Kidus and Cubic. We are excited to be a part of the recoding process needed to mainstream this approach globally with fantastic leaders such as yourself. Now, due to the time limitations, we have to quickly move to the last section of our session. However, we don't want to miss interaction with the audience. So to be able to move forward, I would like to ask all our speakers to take those questions posed in the Q&A. I'm fascinated by the number of interaction in terms of questions and remarks in the Q&A. Imagine if the chat was open, that's massive, but I would encourage all our speakers to please take those questions. And in the meantime, I would like to hand over the floor to my dear colleague, Dr. David Corbett, to walk us through a Slido interaction with the audience. Now it's the opportunity for you to share your insights. Thank you, David. The floor is yours.
Thanks for that, Poria. Hello, everyone. It's great to be a part of this session, and just want to say first and foremost, thanks so much to all of the speakers. It's been really inspiring to hear the interventions so far, and I think it's really broadened my thinking around this agenda and how it can be further designed and integrated into global strategies. So we have a Slido planned now that we'd love for you to take part in. If you can follow the QR code or just follow the link that's been shared in the chat, that would be great. So if we move on to our first question, this is a ranking question. So we want to get from your perspective, if you look at this list of different areas of focus, what would you say is the most important where we need to put attention right now in order to bring about the most significant amount of change that we can? You will have heard about some of these different things during the session. So moving from static to more dynamic solution provision looks like revisiting our decision-making processes is currently the leader, but great to get as many perspectives as possible on this. We see fostering knowledge and solutions sharing between cities just got moved down to third place for developing more networks of collaboration. We heard how vital this is, how scaling solutions, especially coming from the Global South, is really integral to broadening our ideas around climate innovation and innovation to meet human needs. So I think we'll give maybe 10 more seconds for responses, but interesting to see that revisiting our decision-making process is still on top at the moment. And this really, I think, draws attention to the fact that our speakers have been sharing, which is that we need to go deeper into the underlying logic that dictates how we're developing a world that can be sustainable with 11 billion people. So thank you, everyone who contributed so far. I think we can move on to the next question now in the interest of time. So for this question, it would be great. We know that local governments play a really essential role in bringing different stakeholders together and creating this enabling environment to bring about the radical change that we need. So what's the most essential capacity that local governments need in order to innovate, collaborate, and address root causes based on a human needs approach? So this is a word cloud exercise. So feel free, you've got multiple responses. We'd love to see as many people as possible contributing here. You can see at least 6 people typing currently, looking forward to these. So future vision coming up immediately. So this is speaking to that long-term perspective that we've been looking at, the question of where we want to be versus where we are currently, which Dennis also alluded to in the interludes between speakers. We've got humility here, which I think is really interesting. So this maybe ties to the notion of experimentation that was shared by Petra earlier, and being willing to make mistakes and have trial and error as a way to move forward. Exactly, openness to making mistakes is coming through now. Trust building came through really strongly in the session. I think that was really interesting to see. And now radical collaboration coming through as a clear winner currently. I think that this is something that really needs a lot of thought, and I'm really excited with how the expanded climate and innovation agenda deals with radical collaboration, kind of reframing the ecosystem and who's involved in this radical collaboration. So bringing in startups, the innovation space. And as we've heard, there's great ways on the ground currently of this collaboration between the private sector and public sector and changing that relationship. Great, let's move on to the final question. Thank you everyone for the amazing responses to that. So we've spoken a bit about tools during this session, and we want to know from your perspective, what tool would you like to see that could further an expanded climate and innovation agenda? So far we've heard about tools that show cities where they're currently at versus where they want to be. And we've heard about tools that, show how good a strategy is currently in terms of addressing human needs or being a leader in solution finding. So here we see a tool around strategy development, so perhaps enabling that long-term perspective that we were speaking about. And now baseline assessment and future pathways. I think that this is great to see because we've been looking at the quadrant that Dennis shared earlier. Support for startups. I think that this is a great area to look into, perhaps a tool that somehow links what startups are doing with what local governments are doing to find synergies there. We've got more strategy development. This is great to see. Knowledge sharing and provision for joint procurement of solutions. I think that this speaks to that notion of radical collaboration. So what would a tool look like that would enable this radical collaboration? I think that's a really interesting thought that we can take forward into the final discussion here. So not a tool, rather a pack of tools designed in an orchestrated way that can help cities move forward. Not all cities have enough resources. This is a fantastic insight, and I fully agree with this, that there's no single tool that's a catch-all solution for what we're doing. And I think that this notion of a package of tools is actually really great. And this is kind of what we're looking at as well, like where cities are at, how they can get to where they need to be, and what tools help along that journey. I think this is a really interesting thought. So in the interest of time, I'd like to thank everyone for their great contributions to this. And Porja, I'll hand back to you to close what has been, I think, a really fantastic session so far. Thanks.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate that. And I love all those questions, all those reflections and responses. I was just like going through the questions in the Q&A, and like, I read the message from Duan that mentioned that like, oh, we heard the beeper, now we want to learn more. And I think this is quite an achievement. That's what we are hoping to achieve collectively with all our thought leaders. So I would like to invite all our speakers to please turn on their cameras and join me in the closing remarks. I know that we can continue these conversations for hours. And I remember when we were discussing with our events team, it's like, this is a topic that we need at least 90 minutes. And I think this proves that we are right. And I'm so excited that like, we learned a lot, we exchanged a lot, and we can still like go for another hour. But unfortunately, we have to close this discussion for today. But before doing so, I would like to ask each and every one of our speakers here to share their final concluding remarks in 30 seconds, starting with Alison. You know that I'm a fan, so I would like to start with you, please.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's been great. No one has all the answers, but I think together, and it speaks to that radical collaboration piece, I think together, bringing our different perspectives and our experiences, we can really solution focus and support each other together. And I think the daring piece is really, really important. When you think we have a crisis, and I'm reminded of the crisis that was COVID, and the leader of the World Health Organization who said, and I can't get it, I'm paraphrasing, we need to fail to get to the real solution and not to be afraid of that. And that's a fear a lot of public leaders and public organizations have, because we're spending people's money. But I think courage and daring will lead to caring and a lot of sharing.
Thank you so much, Alison. Also, it was very melodic, the last sentence. I really appreciate that powerful message. Moving to our next speaker, Livia. But in the meantime, I would like to ask if Petra is still like there and can turn on her camera. But I know that she's moving her sweet child. But Livia, your concluding remark.
Yeah, for me, to getting close this agenda to the city, to the real challenge of the city, yes, and also to bring our city is known as a technological city, but also need to know to be recognized as a city that is great for this our population. And so I think all these topics is pretty interested because of that. Yes, you bring this discussion close to the population. That's it.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate that, Livia. And now moving to Jan for his 30 seconds remarks.
I heard previously that my voice was hacked during the, but I hope you heard me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. I think the most important thing is to move the focus from doing the small things to providing the solutions for the future, and to really focus on that, on the companies or on the ideas to providing another future. So the small step, we need to take them, but we have to find the big solutions to really change.
Thank you so much, Jan. And I do believe that we need to take millions of small steps, yet daring steps to create that bigger change. Appreciate that. Moving to Petra for her concluding remarks. Hopefully, is still in the playground.
I had to move, but still outside. So I would like to leave you with saying that every crisis is an opportunity. Think of it that way. And taking a first step and just trying things out is really important. And also knowing what the problem you're trying to solve and measuring the impact of your solutions. So it's important to collect data to see if you're moving forward and you're solving the right problems for the right people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Petra. Really appreciate that. And I would like to move to Caitlin for her concluding remark. Over to you, Caitlin.
Thank you. I've got three brief closing thoughts. Innovation doesn't arrive in a white picket fence. And I'd love people to reflect on that. Prior to my innovation journey, I worked in local government. And what I want to say is many of the solutions government needs that innovators are creating are not perfectly going to fit into what you need, but they may have the core elements and the core building blocks of what you need. So be prepared to work to shape something into what could be that proof point that we need to prove future solutions. The second thing I would say is reject skepticism. Reject it in yourself and reject it in others. You will not move forward if you are still allowing skepticism to have space in this agenda. And my third would be, you are the expert. You are the solution. There is no expert who has all these brilliant answers on how to innovate in local government. You don't need any further qualifications. You need to connect and you need to exchange ideas. So have an active plan on how you are connecting with new partners for new thinking.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I think what you said in terms of reject skepticism in yourself and consider yourself as a solution provider could be one of those quotes that throughout this forum would be captured and published. I love that. Thanks so much for that. I'm going to, last but not least, thought leader Dennis for his concluding remark. Dennis, over to you.
Well, thank you would be my concluding remark, I guess. And just my frustration sometimes is that people don't really connect. We have so many investors who wants to move in this direction. We have management consultant who wants support, but there's still a disconnect because the majority of people are still approaching this as a communication and reduction and a compliance agenda, which is important. But this new space, there is filled with passion. There's so many people who want to do that. And also moving forward now, we have COP28 coming up where we can bring together. So I really want to encourage everyone to say, what's on your wish list to make this happen? And we will try to bring those people there or try to make that happen, because we don't have time to wait. And as someone said, we need to dare to fail also. We will not be perfect all the time, but we need to put up things that would dare us to move forward and not just wait until we have the perfect situation. You know, what Alan was doing with the full iceberg approach was, for me, a fantastic example. And what Falkenberg has done with supporting these companies is amazing. And the tech park in Brazil is just an example of all these things happening around the world already. But we need to scale that. And that's why I'm hoping. So scaling and radical collaboration to make that happen, but not just any collaboration, because sometimes we talk about collaboration too much, because we need to be more restrictive also with whom we collaborate, because it can be a chat show and talk show, and we have too many of those. Here we need to link that to measurable impact and positive impact for people. That's sort of my ending word, positive impact for people. If we start and end there, then we'll always find our way forward. Thank you, Purya.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And I'm so grateful that you matured up that line of like radical collaboration, because I do believe in that. But I think like we all agree that like collaboration on what basis and with which actors is absolutely necessary. So thanks so much for adding this to the narrative of this conversation. As we bring this motivating session to a close, I'd like to express my gratitude to each and every one of you for joining us today. A special thanks to our fantastic speakers that I don't need to name them one by one. Now, you know them all. They're like, well-versed and well-known. So this session has achieved, thanks to them, remarkable success by convening an exceptional assembly of worldwide experts and leaders in a truly engaging discussion regarding innovative approaches to address the climate crisis, complete with tangible real-life illustrations. It's been clearly expressed throughout the session the relevance of ensuring that the advantages of innovation are accessible to all communities, especially those most skeptical to the consequences of climate change. Together, we've explored a wide range of transformative solutions to achieve this in the context of an expanded climate and innovation agenda. This agenda has just started gaining more and more tractions, and we would love to encourage and invite all of you to join this force and play the role that you're capable of. As Kathleen mentioned, you are all solution providers, so reject skepticism and let's do it together. And thank you to all of you participants. We've been able to put together this knowledgeable and meaningful and fruitful session with your interaction, and we really appreciate that. Let's maintain the conversation, share our accomplishments, and collaborate to ensure the ongoing progress of this journey. A big thanks to our fabulous Daring Cities team for their wonderful background work in making this forum happen. Before concluding, I'd like to bring to your attention the next Daring Cities session scheduled for today: how to host a mini COP in your town hall, localizing the global stocktake. As you know, global stocktake will be concluded this round at COP28 in Dubai. So we would like to ensure that if you are interested in running a global stocktake at your city or your region, please participate in today's session. We will delve into a how-to webinar providing step-by-step guidance on hosting your local stocktake events and raising awareness of available funding for cities. So I highly recommend joining us for this session to learn from experts and cities that have already held a local stocktake. And if you haven't yet registered, we share the link in the chat right now. Let's continue to strive towards innovation that both addresses the climate emergency and enables flourishing lives for 11 billion people. Together, we can stay motivated, ideate, and ensure that agendas such as this lead to action on the ground. Thank you all, and we look forward to continuing this conversation down the line at COP and in Brazil. Have a great day.